All right, folks, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're about 15 minutes in, and there's a lot to cover tonight. So thank you for joining us. Again, my name is Michael Jones. I work for the Center for Learning and Innovation here at Indiana Wesleyan University on the National Global Campus. And I'm very pleased that you guys could join tonight to talk a little bit about how to prepare for webcasting. Now, some people call it blogging, some people call it vlogging. In this sense, we're talking about webinar or webcasting. It all has to do with how we present ourselves online via video and or interactive experiences. As this field grows and more software becomes available and bandwidth becomes less of an issue, doing this type of thing, I think is going to become more of a norm from a business sense. I'm going to start out showing you some pieces that have been done by some of your contemporaries, other faculty members, and myself to give you some ideas of why you might want to do a webcast. Some people might even call it a flipped classroom and those types of things. But first of all, let's look at a couple of ways that webcasting or flipped classrooms can be used. This first example here is a flipped classroom. One of our professors from our residential campus, Eric Curran, put this together. I'll just play a short clip. I'm going to advance into it a little bit here so you can get a feel for what he's doing.
All right, there's a single replacement reaction, and here's an example what that looks like. A plus BC yields B plus AC. So, right, we can see there that B and A swapped places. A real-life example of this, hey, magnesium plus HCl yields hydrogen gas plus magnesium chloride. Now understand something. I have applied some state symbols here. Those things that are in parentheses, you're like, what in the world are those? So if you see an S, that means solid. So we're talking about magnesium metal there.
Another way that you can use this
when navigating.
This is by Frank Ponce. He's one of our faculty members here. And this is a piece that he's doing to show a student how to do something, his students how to do something. So let's take a look at that real quick.
Into the Connect for Camion companion, choose from your course homepage, choose the content link at the top of the page, top left, and then choose Connect for Camion.
So what he's teaching them is how to get into their EE textbook. I think it's a beautiful piece. It's another way for faculty members to connect with their students by giving them a little boost or a help inside the course. One more example.
I read about how marketing has changed over the last 8 years.
This is a piece that I did as a devotional for a course that I was in.
To simply increasing my exposure over time. See, the longer I stay on their webpage looking at their content, the more likely it is that I'm going to buy whatever it is they're selling, be it ideas or products. I also had a moment of clarity.
So of course this is more produced. It's set up in our studio here. So this is something you could do if you came to campus, or if you're a creative type and you want to start playing with layering backgrounds in a nonlinear editing system. You could produce pieces like this for your classrooms or your own uses online. So those are some ideas and ways to use webcasting in your coursework or in your life with the tools like Facebook and its Facebook live streaming and YouTube live streaming, all kinds of reasons to set up and know what you're doing in this kind of space. One example I didn't have in that list of videos was editing someone's work. So say they submit work to you, you could bring your face up while you go through their work, like having a one-on-one discussion with them. Yes, absolutely. You could use YouTube clips. You'd have to be careful of copyright issues. Copyright can be one of those things that ruins a great idea. Inside a classroom, a live classroom, there are laws that allow you to use YouTube clips, even clips of feature films, if you're talking directly about something in that clip in the classroom. But when we start to stream, using somebody else's copyright material can get us into trouble. So you have to be very careful using YouTube clips if you don't have permission from the owner of the clip. There are tools out there, and as members of IWU community, I believe you can connect with Right Now Media. They've got a ton of clips out there that you can use. You can also license clips through services like Wing Clips, wingclips.com, where there are snippets and pieces that you can of movies and feature films that you can use for your own purposes based upon their licensing and how that's set up. But yes, YouTube is a fantastic resource. Now, if you did want to use a YouTube clip, you could send a link to your students to the YouTube page, have them watch it, and then come back and discuss it in the classroom. That's completely legitimate because you're using their public link for the YouTube site and then discussing it in your class, even though you're not showing it live in the class. Most students, if they're in an asynchronous connection with you, are going to be able to pop out the YouTube, watch that video, and then come back and discuss it. Okay. All right. So what kind of things do we need to do webcasting? The primary things you have to have is some way to capture audio. You're hearing audio right now coming off of this lav microphone, or what's called a lavalier microphone. This is wirelessly set up and goes to one of the cameras that I have connected to me this evening. There are quite a few other ways that you can capture audio, and we're going to look at a couple of those. Obviously, you're going to need some kind of a PC or Macintosh computer that will run the conferencing software, and it may or may not have a camera on the laptop. Just to give you an example, right now I'm running my video through a separate camera from the laptop, but I'll show you what it would look like through my laptop lens. I would need to frame this a little differently. And of course, the lens on my laptop is quite a bit wider, so you catch the edges of my background here, so I don't have a complete spread of my background. But this would be the difference in what it would look like if I were doing it through my actual laptop camera. So it's not too bad from what I had. The white balance is a little off, but let me switch back to that other camera now. And this is through the higher grade professional camera that I'm using behind the laptop. But hopefully that kind of gives you a feel for the lighting design can remain the same and give you great results if you do the lighting correctly. Which brings us to another thing that we need. We need light. So if you're going to run through a camera, you've got to have light, and the way that you use light is important. So in this setup right now, I'm using six different lights. Now, 2 of those have 2 bulbs on them each, and I'll show you those in a little bit. But I'm using 6 different light sources to light this scene. It doesn't seem like it's that complex, but when I show you why I'm using those lights, I hope you'll begin to understand how I'm layering those lights together, and we'll look at that together in a little bit. And then the last thing you need is the camera. Now, you could be using the camera on your laptop. Inexpensive camera that will connect to your laptop and act as a laptop or as a camera for the laptop if you can get your either desktop or laptop to recognize it, or web cameras. A lot of manufacturers make USB web cameras that have a little larger lens, which brings in a little more light so that you have a clearer image. And some of those web cameras allow you to do things such as adjust your focus, adjust your white balance, which is basically telling the camera what color white is so that everything else falls in line. The other thing that those do is sometimes they give you a microphone on the camera itself that might be a little better than the microphone embedded in your computer. And then software. So we're using Zoom this evening. I believe if you're a member of IWU staff or faculty, you should have access to Zoom now. It's fairly straightforward. And I hope that you're able to start using it, practicing by recording some clips of yourself. Maybe do a practice lecture of 3 to 5 minutes and see what you think once you learn some of the skills we're going to talk about tonight. I'm going to switch back to my laptop view and show you some clips that I shot a little bit earlier that's going to talk to you a little bit about background and lighting. All right, here's our first bad example. So I'm in an empty office and I've got this window open behind me to give light to the room. Well, the problem is it's a backlight, so it's obnoxiously bright, and it doesn't allow for the correct exposure here. Now, you'll notice also I'm using the camera on my MacBook, so it's going to auto-expose. So based upon what it thinks is the main thing in the screen, see, it's going to change its exposure. If I have my frame framed a little better, it's still too bright. Although it gives me a little more light here in the face, it's still this terrible lighting schema. This bright light in the background is just obnoxious. It also gives me no light in my eyes, and it gives me what's called raccoon eyes. So I look like I haven't slept for weeks because I'm using just the bright overhead lights in the office, which are the worst lights we could use for this. I have no light showing up in the eyeball either. So where my iris is, there's no reflection of light, so it's called dead eyes. So this is not an ideal situation. I'm going to pause this video and close the bright light behind and let you see the difference here. Okay, now I've closed the blinds behind me, and
actually, this is a good thing. You see how they're moving? If that window was cracked and the breeze was blowing, that would still be distracting. I want to take away anything in my background that might distract from what I'm presenting, what I'm trying to pass along. So this is not a good background. The other thing that happens is the lines in the blinds sometimes cause the autofocus of the camera to lose its focus. So it'll pull its focus from me and focus back on the blinds. The other thing we're looking at here is the camera is below my eye level. So I'm talking down to you. It's the equivalent of somebody putting their laptop in their lap like this, except this is worse because now it's unstable. Every little body movement I make, as you can see here in the lines as they connect to the top of the screen, jostles this camera. Even the slightest movements I have. And that can cause people to get car sick and nauseous. So now I'm looking down, or if I'm looking up because I'm looking at an external monitor to show you what I want to do next, you're staring up into my nostrils, which is not very attractive. Again, I've got a problem here. I've got a little bit of light in my eyes, but I still have these dead-looking raccoon eyes. And that's from the bright overhead lights of this office, which are fluorescent light. And that's where you see kind of the sickly hue to my skin. So we want to pay attention to all these little things. Now, if I put my laptop too high, as some people might set them up on books, then you get this where the view is looking down on you. So this is I'm taking away any power I have, and I'm becoming a weak observer instead of an instructor. So what I would like to do is have that camera at eye level and have my thirds correct. This gives me my strongest presentation view to speak with whoever my constituents are. I can still be a teacher, but I can be a peer and a friend at the same time. So this allows me to do both all through the frame. Now, I apologize for the shaky camera lens here. I'm holding it, but I want to stabilize it this way. Now, looking at this office, I do have a blank wall here. If I were to frame up this direction, that's going to give me a very nice, plain background that's not going to distract from the topic that I'm talking about. Now, I did have a window in this office too. So let's see, without adding any lights to this, if I can make this a better image. So I'm going to set this down and pause our video again. Okay, so I turned to a more plain or neutral background here, as you can see, and I'd want to adjust that to clean it up as much as possible. This is not real stable. It's got a little bit of a lean, but for the purposes of this conversation, I think it'll work for us. Now, I also opened the blinds a little to let a little bit of light in. So it's given me what would be considered a key light on this side of my face. And it's also given me a little bit of light in my eyes. Watch what happens if I shift to face more towards the light with the light that goes into my eyes. I'm going to do that next.
So far, we've talked about the background and why it's important that you pay attention to what's there. I see a lot of videos that are presented online that have bookshelves in the background. I think the idea we have is that it's academic. It shows the books that we're interested in. It tells a little story about us. Yes, it absolutely does. Unfortunately, the story is, let's distract them figuring out what books you like or what's reading or what's on your shelf or if it's clean or cluttered instead of the topic that you're talking about. So having a plain or a neutral background that no one's going to be walking through, that won't be capturing extra sound from the room around you. Those types of things are really important. Now, in this example, it was an office that had one window and I just had some overhead fluorescent lights on. So the next clip I'm going to play you is a clip that once I've turned 45 degrees to that window, you'll see the difference it makes that image. And then we'll flop back and forth and take a look at the differences between the beginning image and the final image, not adding any lights at all.
Okay, we're back. And this time I've placed myself at a 45-degree angle from the brightest light source in the room, which is that window. Well, that window is now giving me a nice key light. And the computer is saying from an exposure standpoint that is now the brightest light, and therefore it's giving me good exposure on my face. You'll also notice that I have light in my eyes, so my eyes are alive, and the raccooning that was happening underneath my eyebrows has now been lifted because my light source, which is my key light, which is that window, is brighter than any other light source in the room.
I'm going to make a little comment here. If you look at my eyes and my eyebrows, I'm fairly light-complected person. My eyebrows are blonde. My eyelashes are blonde. If I wanted to really pay attention to that, even as a man, I would potentially look at putting on some brown or a light brown mascara, and then maybe getting an eyeliner pen and doing some fill-in work on my eyebrows to make them just slightly darker brown. It's going to bring out more human characteristics, and believe it or not, it makes you more relatable. People watch it easier. You look better when you do things like that. Now, I've also got some skin blemishes. I could cover those skin blemishes up. I could use a makeup cover-up pen. I could use powder. There's things that I could do to this image, even just using the window as my key light and an overhead light in the room for fill light in the back, by adding a little bit of makeup effects, if you will, which highlight the human aspects that people are attracted to, eyebrows, eyelashes, and those types of things. I could increase the production value of what's going on inside this video. I know that a lot of people are hesitant to do those things, but honestly, when you're on camera, people don't even notice that it's there. They notice more when it's missing than they ever do when it's there. So when we have folks in the studio, I regularly am putting powder and blemish cover-up on folks that are in the studio, because I know that in the end result that they see, they're going to love so much more than if I just let it be what it was. Now, speaking about that, oh, good question, Sylvia, about color of clothing. So in this image, the shirt that I have on has a pretty busy pattern on it. What that can do is, just like the blinds can do, is it'll cause your camera to try and figure out where its focus is. So it'll do this back and forth focus thing. The other thing is I have colors in that shirt that are very similar to the background color of that table. So I could easily get lost or confuse eyes or give eye fatigue to people. If you look at my setup today, I'm wearing a light gray shirt with a white background, but I've got shadows back here that almost blend to the same color of gray. So how do I pull off a gray shirt with gray gradients in the background? I'm going to show you a little bit more about that when we talk about lighting, but that's a fantastic question. The other thing you want to pay attention to is your skin tone. So I tend to have a lot of reds and pinks in my skin, and you can see that even in this bluish, whiter light, that I have a fairly red pigmentation on my face. If I were wearing red or pink shirt, my skin I would look like I had a sunburn, because my camera would be trying to figure out what my skin tone is. Now, in post-production software, I can adjust my skin color fairly easy. They know that that's an issue, and so they work with us with software tools to make us be able to adjust our skin tones. So you have to pay attention to what highlights and balances your skin tone. Same thing as you would if you were dressing to go up for an evening, and women are much more familiar with this. They know what colors accent their skin. They know what colors accent their eyes. So those are important things to keep in mind. And even for men, ask your wife or your girlfriend or significant others, what colors do I look good in? A lot of times you can look in your closet and you'll see my closet is full of blues and blacks and some greens. Those are my primary go-to colors. I like those colors, but I also feel like they look good on my skin tone. So that's a great question about color of clothing. So try and remember two things: not to wear something that's super busy from a pattern perspective, and to wear something that's earth toned is usually best, but something that's toned well with your skin tone. So if you've got a lot of pink or red in your face or your coloring, don't wear things that accentuate that. Hopefully that helps answer your question there on the color of clothing. Another thing is accessories. Be careful, and especially with ladies, wearing scarves or necklaces with big beads or large earrings. Those things can rattle against a microphone. And let me just show you. Just to barely tap with a piece of plastic, and it completely kills my audio quality. So you want to make sure this is all clear. If you're using a microphone like this one from like Apple, an Apple headset is what this is from, which I'll show you the sound quality between these here in just a little bit. If you're using one of these, it rubbing on a scarf or bouncing can be obnoxious and wipe out what you're saying. So be really careful with your clothing choices and your accessories so that they don't distract. Another thing that happens is real bright, blingy accessories. It may not look real bright and blingy until you put that brooch on and then turn all your lights on, and then it's shining this light that's distorting and causing your camera exposure to mess up. Simple is better in this situation. All right, I'm going to return to this video and let you see a little bit more about what I'm talking about here with color, and then we'll talk some more.
There's still a problem. I've got this weird pallor and skin color. A lot of that is due to the color of the light coming in from outside as it mixes with this greenish light coming from these fluorescent bulbs. That's going to give me this odd color pallor. So how can we take this and using practical lights that we can find around our home or cheap at another store and improve this look? So we're going to do that next.
All right, let's do that next. Okay, I told you the number of lights that I was using in the studio here. So let me give you a little behind the scenes look. So this is the side view of my setup in the studio today. Obviously, I've got a lot more gear here than you're going to need to do webcasting because of the nature of wanting to give you different angles on what I'm doing and talking about today. So in this setup that you're looking at in a wide view here, let me point to some of the lights that I'm using and what they're called and what their purpose is, okay? So one of the first lights that I'm using is this light up here. I believe that you can see that. Yeah, you can. It's a long bar light. I'm using as what's called a key light, and the key light is at a 45-degree angle from me, and it is the brightest light in the room. Okay, this one's going to put off the most light, and it's going to give me the most light in my face. So I'm going to switch back here. So if I were to turn off the key light, let me show you what that is. So that was my, oops, turn it off. There we go. So that's if my key light is off. So you can see that it's a significant amount of light in the scene. So I'm going to turn that key light back on. Okay, there's my key light. It's at its brightest setting again. I want to show you one other thing about color temperature. So color temperature refers to what they call the Kelvin rating, or they'll call it like 5,000 degrees Kelvin. That rating is the color of the light. So if you have the lower end, like 2,400 or 2,400 degrees Kelvin, those are your warm kind of yellow lights. Then you've got the color schema that I'm using here, which is a 5,000 degree Kelvin, which is more, it's considered daylight. It's close to daylight, like the light that you would get at midday, not sunset or sunrise, but midday daylight. It's a very blue light. As an example, I'm going to go to a close-up view here. So this is a bulb that I replaced in one of the lights, which the fill light that I'm using. This bulb in the store is labeled 5,000 degrees Kelvin. I hope you can see that. It also says down here that it's daylight. Okay, and it gives me the brightness rating of it. So it's 1,450 lumens, this bulb is. Now, I bought this bulb at a local hardware store. You can get them at Home Depot, Menards, Lowe's, whatever's close for you. This is a CFL, so basically it means it doesn't put off a lot of heat. So I can put a bunch of them in and around a room and not be melting. And it's only using 23 watts, which is nice. The other thing I'm going to point out is that it's dimmable. So that's an idea of the type of bulb you can get. Now, they are a little more expensive than regular bulbs, but if you can balance that Kelvin degree all to the same bulb, it doesn't really matter if you're 5,000 or 2,400, as long as they're all the same. But let me show you why that's important, okay? So I'm going to switch back to our main view here, and I'm going to change. One of the nice things about this key lamp, let me give you this look. One of the nice things about this lamp here is that it allows me to change its color temperature dependent upon what's outside. Now, the desk I have at home has a window here, my workstation, and this light. And I typically will turn this light around and bounce it off the wall because I like it to be a little softer. But if it's a warm temperature outside, I can change the color temperature of this to this yellow hue. Now, let me switch back here. Now I'm mixing two different colors of light. So let me cycle that. So that's a real warm yellow. That's probably around 2,400 degrees Kelvin. But on my fill side, I've got a light over here. I'm going to increase its luminance, which is blue. So it's the 5,000 degree Kelvin bulb that I was showing you box. See the confusion in the image? Now all of a sudden what's supposed to be white isn't white anymore. And it kind of gives this weird hue. On one side, I've got blue, which comes off as a little bit green. On the other side, you can really see it in the shadows. See this yellowish, brownish shadow. And then on this side, you've got this grayer, more true to color shadow on this side. That's because I'm using two different color sources. Now, you can run into the same issue if you have yellow lights in your house and you're trying to use a window as your key light. Well, the outside light from the window is going to be 5,000 degrees. whatever you have in the house might be warmer. So I'm going to change this back to the 5,000 degrees Kelvin and let me see the difference here. Now I'm back. I'm going to bring my fill light back down in its brightness a little bit here. Okay, so now I've got my 5,000 degree Kelvin on both sides. My shadows match. My background looks nice again. So that's why you want to balance the light that you're using when you're doing a podcast. It's great if you've got different light sources, but try and grab light sources that allow the same color match so that your skin looks correct. Now, we talked a little bit about those colors. What do you do if you don't have, say you have one 5,000 degree bulb and you have a 2,400 degree bulb? What do? Well, you can go to just about any photography store and pick up what are called gels, colored gels. Now, one of these gels is blue, so it turns yellow light to your blue 5,000 degree Kelvin color. Then there's the other one is a orange gel, and that's going to change your color from your blues to your warmer color. So you can buy these cheap, fairly inexpensively, and they're heat resistant, so you can set them pretty close, or use a wooden clothespin to clip them close to enough to the bulb that it affects the light. Now, I use the wooden ones for two reasons. One, they don't conduct heat. So if you're clipping it near something that's warm, it's not going to conduct the heat. So when you try and take that off, it's not burning your fingertips. But also they're inexpensive, lightweight, easy to carry around. We call them CJ47s in the business, but wooden clothespin. Okay. Another item here before I move on from light. In the backgrounds, if you take you can make what's called a gobo. Okay, so this is just as you can see, a mail priority that I received in the mail, and I cut up, and I took a razor and sliced some slices into it. I can shine a bright light source behind that and throw really interesting shapes onto my background. So if I've got a plain wall, but it's just too plain, and I want to look more interesting, I can shine a light through this, even a flashlight through this, and it'll give me designs on my back wall that are subtle and look really cool and nice. If I add a gel to this, then I can throw colored slashes on the wall that's behind me and increase the interest of that wall even more. We've talked about color temperature of light and how important it is to have that matched. We talked about not having super bright things behind you in your background. We've talked about ways that we can manipulate the color of light and the brightness of light. We talked about the key light. Now let's move on to these other lights. Okay, so our key light is our brightest light in the room. The next brightest light is the fill light. Now I'm just using a lamp, and you can see this lamp right here. Okay. Actually stole that off of my boss's desk here at work. Thank you, Brad. Appreciate the contribution to tonight's webisode. This lamp is a standard lamp. He had a warmer bulb in it. I took that bulb out and put that 5,000 degree Kelvin bulb in it so I could match it. The other thing that you'll notice is I have some gels. Not specifically gels, but they're what's called diffuser sheets. You can get them in a photograph store for fairly expensive. You can order them on Amazon pretty cheap. They're just heat resistant, semi-opaque sheets, the same size as these gels. And what they do is they take what's harsh light and they soften it. So I'm going to switch back to this view. I'm going to go remove those diffusers, if you will. Okay. Matter of fact, let me see if I can freeze this. Okay, I removed the diffusers off of that. Now that is acting as my key light. It's a much harsher light now coming at me, especially if I can still dim it down to do kind of the same thing. But if that's on full, that now becomes my key light, and this other light becomes my fill light. So you can see now that I've got quite a bit more gloss to my skin because that light is so much harsher. You also notice I've got a lot harder shadows from that light. Okay, let me put the diffuser back on there. I'll be right back. Okay, that's with the diffuser paper back on, and let me switch it back here. So now those shadows aren't as harsh. See how they're softer edged? They're not as hard lined. And I can dim that light bulb back down because it's a dimmable bulb, and put my key light back to my key light. So that's kind of the difference in how those lights work. Now, I do have my glasses on, but if you notice that you can see light, I don't have these raccoon eyes because my lights are coming in at nice angles. And I also have a glint of light in my eyes, which keeps my eyes alive. Now, the glasses, let's talk a little bit about glasses. Many of us wear them. If I'm looking up like this at the camera, I've got this hot spot. Oh, here it is on this side. This hot spot that's hitting in my glasses and reflecting off of them. A trick for fixing that is simply either to raise that light just a little more or raise the back of my glasses just a touch, like this. Now I can take that glare completely off my glasses, and it doesn't look unnatural as long as nobody sees me do it. A lot of people won't even notice that it's happened. Another thing I want to caution you is some people will wear their glasses down low like this because they're looking over the top of their glasses and then looking at their glasses and back over the top of their glasses. If that beam of those glasses is going across the pupil of your eye, your audience is going to disconnect from you. It's important that we have eye contact with our audience. So I just wanted to make a couple of observations there. All right. Let me go to a close-up and talk a little bit about this diffuser, or not diffuser, but this little box here. I picked this box up. I think we got it from Lowe's as well, because that's our local hardware store. But the other end of it goes to a plug that plugs into the outlet, and then the lamp plug plugs into that. And it's got a little controller here. Let's see if I can bounce the light off of it. There we go. That slides up and down. And that gives me the ability to dim that light or really brighten that light. It's a fairly inexpensive solution as long as you have a dimmable bulb. But that allows you to adjust your lighting to give the right amount of light for what you're trying to accomplish. So again, just a inexpensive little dimmer that's household based. It's not like professional gear. It's something you can buy for your home. Okay, so we've talked about the key light, brightest light in the room. Talked about the fill light. It's the second brightest light in the room, and it's simply to fill in the darkness. So if we turn that fill light off, you can see how dark that side of my face becomes. So we want to be able to add some light to that and try and get a more even lighting schema. All right, so that's the fill light. Now we're going to talk about these backlights here. All right, on the backlights, let's see, can you see? I'm going to go adjust this camera so you can see them all. But first of all, let's talk about the background lights. This little light here, I bought it at Lowe's, and it's just got two little flexible eyelets on it here, okay? And so you get it shadowed. It's like a little alien looking thing, but man, you talk about a handy light to have for this type of thing, because I can throw those little bulbs just about anywhere I want. If I give you the close-up on this, you can also see that I have some little pieces of what's called gaff tape. You can do it with duct tape too, because these don't put off a lot of heat. But I just put little shades on them so that I can control that light a little more. So, and this just has a little on-off switch on it here. So it just switches on and off. Super simple, flexible. It allows me to put light where I want it. I think I got them for $12. And I just want to set that light down and aim it in a way that looks appealing onto my background. Let's see, that looks like about where it was. So that's how I'm getting this light in the background. If I turn that off, I'll let you see the difference. So now I've got some pretty harsh shadows from my key lights because I can't get far enough away from that wall. And that wall drops off and disappears in the background. Now, that's not necessarily bad. I wouldn't say that's a bad situation. It still looks okay. But if I add that light, it just really makes me pop and stand out a little bit more from my background. Makes it a little more artistic and gives me a little bit of more depth to the shot that I'm doing here. Now, one of these lights, this one here, looks a little harsher than that one. So I would just play with that and figure out what looks good again. Last light that I want to talk about, so that's a background light. So we've got our key light, our fill light, and our background light. The key light and the fill light are the essential ones. Your background light and what's called a hair light aren't near as important, but boy, do they add a lot to it. So let me show you what that looks like. So with our background light, and this is working a little bit as a hair light because it's missing its it's missing its little shade that I put on it to keep light from coming forward and just going up. but the hair light is in the back here. So I'm going to it's going to turn off my background light too. But let me do that first. Okay. So there's my no background light, but you still see a light here on my shoulders and on the top of my head. It's not super noticeable, but watch where it goes when I turn it off. So now I've just got all shadow here and there's no light on the top of my head. Okay. So I'm going to turn that back on. Watch for the difference. Now I've got that light back on the top of my head and across my shoulders. It's just a kiss of light. It's not super bright, but that's called a hair light. And that allows me to stand out from my background. Another way to look at this is so you can see exactly what the hair light's doing. I'm going to shut these other lights off. There's my hair light. Can you see how much light it's actually putting off now? And of course, my camera exposure adjusted a little bit because I dimmed my light down and it said, ooh, I need to make things lighter. But that is just the hair light by itself and how much light it's showing. Now, if I add my fill light, and my key light, and my background light, and boom, we've got a very nice image again. So that is how you play with lights. And again, I'm using stuff I've just bought at regular stores here, household lamps. The biggest thing is just changing the bulb out and getting the right color match. So anyone have any questions on lights, where I have them placed? Matter of fact, let me go back to this for you. Where I have these lights placed, 45-degree angles for my key and my fill light. And then my hair light's back up here, just out of view of the camera. Let me show you where that is. So there's the hair light up here. I just brought it up here and hung it up at the top. I put the little shades on it so it's not shining into my camera lens, and just cut it so that it comes just down to where my shoulders are in the shot. The type of lamp that the hair light is the same exact one I'm using on the background back here. I bought 2 of those little flexi-eyed lamps. But what works really good for a hair light is anything that you can get a fairly tight beam on that you can adjust the brightness of. So I've seen little flashlights work really well. I'm sorry, I'm talking to the wrong camera. I've seen little flashlights work really well. I've seen like I guess it's called a torche lamp that has an adjustable dimmer switch. So it comes up on a base and it has a big bowl that shines up on a ceiling. If you take those and put them in the background and shine them and bounce the light off the ceiling, sometimes that bounced light works really good as a hair light. So just some examples. It's typically a smaller light. You don't want anything huge back there because you want your brightest lights up front. But even a huge light with a dimmer switch could work well in the background for the hair light. I think I said it, but just to be clear, about a 45-degree angle away from you for your key light and your fill light. And you want your key light up fairly high, so not right down here in your face. You want it up a little higher, and your fill light can be a little lower because it's just filling light and it's a softer light. All right, so we've talked about color temperature. We've talked about key, fill, hair, and background lights, 45-degree angles, and I give you some tips for when you're wearing glasses. Let's talk a little bit about the camera itself and camera angles. So when you build your frame around when you put yourself in the frame, I should say, you want to make sure that you're in the thirds of the screen. In this view, this is called a head and shoulders type shot. In this view, I want my thirds, as you can see, like if I had an imaginary third across here and another imaginary third across here, and then 2 more imaginary thirds right there, okay? So I'm dead center. I actually like it better when I'm off center just a little like this with nose room. So whichever way I'm slightly facing, that's called nose rooms, whichever you want more space on this side of the screen than on this side of the screen. Unless you're purposely filming a horror movie, then you've got this, and this metaphorically, the screen says, hey, you've got no options. All your options are behind you. These are things that we say in our mind when we see a frame. Another mistake that I see made a lot is the low angle or the high angle frame, which we talked about. If you can put yourself just off center in a shot and put your mouth and nose at about the intersection of your thirds. So again, if we have our thirds here, ideally, I would be about here talking in that frame. But because I'm the only thing on the screen, I'm going to move a little more into the center and just be off center just a touch. The horizontal third should come across our eyes. Now, if I'm going further back, if I'm in what's called a mid shot like this frame is not too bad, but I'm going to adjust my third down the further I get from my camera. So I would prefer to see a frame more like this, okay? So I would be closer to my chest with that horizontal third, than my mouth. The closer I get, my third adjusts to my mouth and eyes. So whatever's most important goes in the third. So when you're framing yourself, even if you're framing yourself knowing that you're going to be a small window in the bottom corner because you're doing a screen share, frame yourself correctly. Don't put yourself down like I see a lot of folks do. They're in the very bottom corner of the screen like this talking. If you're in the bottom of the screen like this, there's nothing interesting because all this is still dead space. Or they'll set themselves in the screen super low in the screen like this, and all of the space is just obnoxious. So you always want to grab your laptop screen or your camera or whatever it is and adjust it so you're thirds. And make sure it's where you're comfortable sitting, because what will happen a lot of times, and it happens to me too, is I'll get it framed up like this, and then I'll start doing a lecture, and then I decide I want to lean back, and all of a sudden I shoot my frame, and it's no longer appealing. So a couple of things there on thirds, making sure that you have nose room, you've got a little bit of headroom, your third is close to the middle of your face. If you move further away from the screen, then that third drops closer to the chest, okay? That just gives you some aesthetics on the correct frame that's easier to watch. Let's see, what's next on our thing? Oh, stability. We talked a little bit about that earlier. Make sure you stabilize your camera. You don't want to set it on your lap, the dash of a car, on the washing machine. You'd be surprised what I've seen. A stable image is going to be a much easier to watch image for any length of time. And speaking of length of time, make sure that when you're doing lectures, be nice to the people watching them. So don't do like we're doing a webinar, which hopefully has been entertaining and instructional, but you don't want to try and do real long ones and give it to them to watch. It's better to break it up into smaller pieces, say 3 to 5 minutes, and have them watch them in pieces, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. In those situations, students can see how long each video clip is. They can discuss with themselves how much time they have to watch it. And they don't feel like if they get, a quarter of the way through a 45-minute lecture and then have to leave, they know where they get back to without missing something. So doing them in smaller parts and more digestible bits is preferred over doing them in a very long form video, especially if it's something that's pre-captured. If you're doing a lecture or an asynchronous connection with a group of students, then an hour is expected, hour and a half even. So let's see, white balance. We talked a little bit about white balance. It's kind of hard to do a white balance on a laptop camera. If you have an external camera you can connect, or a web camera that allows you to do white balance, again, that's telling the computer what color white is, and then it bases all the other colors off of that. So even if you've got a strange mix of bulb color, if you set your white balance, the camera can sometimes compensate for the 2 different color lights and give you something in between. Fluorescent lights are notorious for casting a green hue. So if you're doing your video and it looks like you're kind of sickly green pallor to your skin, or an orange pallor to your skin if you've got a darker complexion. That could be the lights. And so you might think about adjusting the color temperature of the lights. And the last thing I want to talk about in regards to camera is focus. This camera that we're using tonight is set on an autofocus, so I can roll back and that focus is going to follow me. I can move forward and that focus is going to follow me. But not all cameras are able to do that. And again, busy patterns in the background or on a shirt can cause a camera to go woo, 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 and push in and out of focus. You may not even be able to see it in your small screen, but somebody else watching you with it full screen can get vertigo and nauseated by watching that focus pop in and out. So if you have the ability to lock your focus, then lock your focus on the camera, and that way it doesn't auto adjust while you're trying to give your lecture or talk or move around. The last part of our webinar tonight I want to talk about, well, there's two pieces. Let me do the last one first so I don't miss anyone if you have to leave. Scripts. Make sure you put together a script before you do your webinar. So I've got my script right in front of me here, right below. You've probably seen me look down at it a few times with all my notes on it. I don't want to miss saying something, and I want to make sure that what I'm saying isn't full of a bunch of ums. So by having a list or a script, it makes a big difference when it comes to the way I deliver, and it cuts so much down on anything I've got to edit after the fact. So I have some type of a script, especially if you're going through a screen-by-screen tutorial, like showing the student how to access an ebook. Go through it first, record yourself going through it, make a script. And then when you go through it the next time, you'll have every word. You won't have to think about what you're saying. Scripts can give you a professional edge over just about anything else. Okay, last thing I want to talk about is a little bit about sound. Now, this is going to be a little awkward because I've got quite a few different microphones here I want you to hear. And that'll take me a moment to adjust in between them. So you're hearing right now this lav microphone. And it's pretty sensitive to my voice and doesn't pick up a lot of room noise. There are several other types of microphones that you might be using. These little Apple microphones or a headset with a microphone may be one of them. So I'm going to switch my computer to go to this microphone. Bear with me just a moment. I've got to turn off the lav mic so it'll be silent for a moment. Okay, now you should be hearing me through this microphone here. This microphone, a lot of people will hold it out from them, but they're meant just to hang as long as it's not banging or running into anything. This microphone allows fairly close sounds without picking up a lot of room noise. They work very well as long as, again, you're not abusing that microphone. Sometimes you can even take these microphones and hang them just off camera. So you can tell that my voice got a little quieter, but it's still picking up my voice. And that's one way to go without having to have earbuds in while I'm presenting. So it's a fairly good microphone. Another thing that you can do if you don't need the headset portion of it, a lot of folks will clip this wire off right here and hide this underneath their collar. And so it's a kind of a cheap wired lav microphone if you didn't want it to show up. Okay, so that's a lav microphone. Another type of microphone we have here, let me switch back to, I'm going to switch to a different mic. Hang on just a moment. Okay, the microphone I'm talking to you through now is this one. This is called a Blue Snowball microphone. So you can kind of get a feel for what it looks like. Sorry if my hand noise is making noise on this microphone. Also, with this microphone, it's fairly sensitive. So if I say things like puff or pop or papa or snowball or I'm blowing on that microphone, you're going to get these obnoxious pops. That's why they make this. This is called a pop guard. I put the pop guard in front of it. Now I'm going to say pop and puff and poof and blow on the microphone and do all those great things, and none of that sound translates. This one's a fairly close proximity microphone. I'm going to set it down the desk. Okay, now I'm talking through this microphone with the pop guard in place, but I'm a little further away from it. When I'm this far away from that microphone, it still picks up, but you can tell the subtle difference in the noise quality, the sound quality. These run about $80. I think we got it $80 with the puff guard or the pop guard. But honestly, you can make this puff guard with a pair of pantyhose and a wired coat hanger. So you take the wired coat hanger, shape it into a circle. You take that, shape it into a circle,
drag the pantyhose over. It gives you a 2-layer puff guard and just attach that between you and your microphone. That'll keep noise and puff sounds from hitting the microphone. Last microphone I want to talk about here is the boom microphone. So this is the boom microphone here. I've got some yellow yarn hanging off of it. Actually do this for folks in the studio so they don't hit their head on it. So it just is a little warning device before you run into the microphone itself. But the microphone is here. See if I can highlight it with a little bit of white behind it here. That's better. So the boom microphone, also called a shotgun microphone, is typically a tube. This has its own battery, but some of them don't. You have to push what's called 48-volt phantom power to allow them to work, which requires some type of audio device that will push voltage to the microphone. This one has a battery, so it doesn't require that. These can be turned on to telescopic, or they can be more localized. In telescopic mode, the pattern that comes out, it kind of comes out at a cone like this. And there's little ribs on the sides of this that actually cancel room noise out of whatever noise you're talking to underneath it. But it's still going to pick up some room noise. So let me let you hear that one. Okay. Yep. So there's our boom microphone. You can kind of hear the difference. It gives a deeper, warmer tone to my voice, which is more realistic. I love using a boom microphone because I believe they give you a truer sound, but you can also hear more room noise. So you've got more of a hiss because we've got some overhead pipes here. However, this thing's going to give you your richest, deepest sounds when it comes to audio volume. When I switch back to this lav microphone, you'll notice that the sound quality is a little bit tinnier. So I'll keep talking while I make the switch. I'm going to take the boom mic down and switch back to the lav mic, which is a little more tinny. Takes out some of the low frequencies, but it also cuts out some of the room noise. Hopefully that gives you some insight into how to set up your own workspace. Again, please feel free to email me. Be glad to do a one-on-one Zoom session with you and look at your setup, coach you through some of that, give you feedback on your sound quality and those types of things. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and I look forward to hearing from you as you get ready to do your own webisodes and your own setups.